The Arctic, the land under the Great Bear. Unique territories, some of them uncharted to this day. Thawing of perennial ice has made them ever more interesting for humans. The interest in the Arctic itself is growing as well. But with each advance north grow the responsibilities of subarctic countries. Responsibility for the nature, responsibility for the unique culture of indigenous people, responsibility for preserving their ways of life. Today, the endless Arctic is home for the indigenous people of the north. Nomadic tribes never cared much for borders, but life doesn't stand still. Countries have put borders on the map, and indigenous people had to face that fact. Sometimes integration has been painful, colonization and assimilation, taxes and tribute. All the people have their own history, but looking back through history, we can see a common bond. We can see the key event changing their fates. We can see the junction points and where each one has led them. For a long time, northern people lived on their own, in multicultural Russia. Their contact with others limited to the so-called yasak, a tribute and first they paid to the government. The Nenets people were one of the first indigenous people who had contact with Russians. One can find mentions of them in the chronicles starting 11th century. Being closer to the Russian population played a great role in the history of the Nenets people. However, a great deal of merchants exploited them, and as a result, many Nenets were pushed into poverty. A lot of households lost their reindeer herds. Starting 19th century, the Nenets have been baptized by force. Only after the revolution of 1970, the Soviet government decided to build a relationship with the people of the North in a new way. 1920s and 1930s saw the development of the alphabets for many ethnic languages, active education campaigns and campaigns against illiteracy. State farms and reindeer farms have been created all along the tundra. The Nenets children got a chance to study in boarding schools for the first time. Relations between the government and indigenous population have also been rough at first. Starting 9th century, Norwegians start collecting tribute from the Sami living in Scandinavia. The second half of the 19th century saw a centralized policy of Norvegization towards the Sami people, who have been living in the northern part of the Scandinavian peninsula for centuries. The policy started with active attempts to baptize the Sami population. Officials in the local administration were solely Norwegian. Eventually, the boarding schools were created for the Sami children, where they were not allowed to speak their native language. The Sami land were under heavy development. In 1987, in Norway, the popular movement against development of the Alta-Kautokeino waterway was founded. The background for the controversy was a published plan by the Norwegian Water Resources and Energy Directorate that called for the construction of a dam and hydroelectric power plant that would create an artificial lake and inundate the Sami village of Mazi.
October in '79, a group of Sami people started a first hunger strike in Oslo. And this hunger strike lasted for a week, but it got a lot of international attention and a lot of course, domestic attention from the Norwegian media. And the Norwegian Prime Minister and the government, of course, decided then that they would form a committee or a commission that would look into the issues of Sami land and water rights. So the construction building in Alta stopped for a while, and there was also a court case going at the same time, so there were many things that kind of stopped the construction building.
After fighting for their land, the Sami people started fighting for their rights. Acts of civil disobedience echoed through the country, only to be forcibly suppressed by the police.
In 1982, the Norwegian Supreme Court decided that the Norwegian power company have the right to build this dam without asking Sami anything. And that judgment was very hard for me to swallow. So to make a protest against this Supreme Court decision, me and 2 other Sami men went up to this power dam area, which was a construction area then, and made a symbolic explosion under a bridge. It was in March, I don't remember the date, but it was very cold that night. And the explosive, which was 1 piece of dynamite, exploded right in my arm, so I lost my hand, and I was also then put to jail and charged for, after the Norwegian most dangerous paragraph, which is the paragraph they use for terrorists. And I was they were then going to give me a jail time for 21 years in jail.
Today, the Sami political rights activist Niilo Sombi lives in a small town in the county of Finnmark. Hunger strikes and demonstrations are now in the past, but they are not forgotten. Niilas and his supporters are doing all they can so that it never happens again.
This whole process with this river hydro power dam also led till that Norway decided to make a commission, Sami Rights Commission. They were in a way forced to it because the Sami started to raise up and ask for their rights, and that had not happened before in the history. That the Sami organizations and Sami people, and it was lots of people then asking for Sami rights, and then Norway decided that okay, we make a commission which finds out what kind of rights the Sami people have.
Mass protests and demonstrations had desired effect. In 1984, the Sami Rights Committee published its first report entitled On the Legal Status of the Sami, which formed the basis for the Sami Act of 1987. 2 years later, the Sami Parliament of Norway opened in Karasjok. The parliament is a representative body for the people of Sami heritage in Norway. It works with political issues it considers relevant to the Sami people.
Right to negotiate or to consult with the government on every issues that the Sami Parliament wants to do, or issues that the government wants to consult with the Sami Parliament. That gives us a chance at least to have a say in what the government decides to do on all the issues that we think concerns our daily life.
Only the Sami have a right to vote in the parliamentary elections. To be eligible to vote, one has to prove that he truly belongs to the Sami people.
There are 39 representatives sitting in the General Assembly Hall, and they are elected by Sami people from all of Norway. There are about 15,000 people in the electoral roll who are able to vote, and they vote for their candidates from all of Norway, from north to south. And there are 7 electoral districts from all of Norway, and each district has their own number of mandates who have their seats in the General Assembly Hall.
The law stipulates that the Norwegian government has to take into consideration all the propositions and recommendations given by the Sami parliament. However, the parliament still has no power to veto anything regarding the territories where the Sami people live. Today, the fight is on to give this power to the parliament.
We should have final say in all matters that we think are essential for the Sami people. But that is not the case in Norway today. We have the right to consult and we have the right to advise, but no right to self-determination, and that is a problem. We should have rights when it comes to land use, when it comes to our traditional livelihoods, and how fisheries should be managed and those things.
I would say one of our main challenges in the future is to have a secure economic system for the Sami parliament, because we have to depend on the goodwill of the Norwegian government to be able to have programs for Sami language, for Sami education, reindeer herding, businesses, farming and so on, fisheries. All those programs are being supported by the Sami parliament, and the Sami parliament receives economic support from the government. So in the future, and that's also in terms of self-governance, we need to have some sort of secure income, economical income for the Sami parliament. We can't always depend on the goodwill of the Norwegian government, because politics change. There are different political parties. Some are more and some are less positive to Sami development. So I think that's one of the main issues going on.
Kvenes are another ethnic minority living in Norway. They have not been recognized as native or indigenous people. However, in 1996, the Kvenes were granted minority status in Norway. Ivar Jonsson is the leader of the Norwegian Kven Association, the largest Kven organization.
The Kvenes are known from about 900 years after Christ. It's the first time it's written about the Kvenes. And today we don't know how many Kvenes there are in Norway. The government say it's maybe 10 to 15,000. We say it's between 50 and 100,000. So we don't agree, and they don't want to measure it in any way. And our main goals is to work with the Kven language and Kven culture and Kven history, because the Kvens are about to be getting forgotten in Norway. They are almost nothing in the history books of Kvens, and even people in the Kvenish areas don't know much about the Kvens.
The Kvens have settled around the northern Europe about 1,000 years ago. With them they have brought their culture and traditions, which have been taking strong roots in their new homeland. Eventually, the Kvens have become an integral part of the spiritual and material culture of the land. Not all Kvens want the government to recognize their ethnic status. It may have to do with the fact that many of them used to be afraid of it.
The reason why they don't want to call themselves Kvens is that when there were so many Kvens in this area, the authorities thought there were too many. And they started this, they wanted people to speak Norwegian, they wanted people to hear Norwegian radio and so on. And they should speak Norwegian before they could buy any land. So it was very strict.
We have not concluded if we want to be an indigenous people. Mm-hmm. Of course, a lot of Kvens wants to, but others says they don't. But what we all agree that we need is a lot of more funding for the governments, for teaching materials and so on, so that the Kvens those who want to learn the language could learn it. And we want the Kvens to once again could be proud about their culture and their language.
Committee for the Assistance to the Peoples of the Northern Borderlands was the first Soviet state body responsible for the work with indigenous people. Formed in 1930s, the Northern Committee, as it was called, aimed to foster the cooperative movement in the tundra, as well as to develop reindeer herding and overcome economic and cultural backwardness of the Nenes people. It was a time of great expectations. Nenes culture houses opened in the region. Red chums set off for the tundra for education and propaganda. In the 1990s, the country switched to the market economy. The collective farm stopped being profitable. The reindeer herders went without a salary for years.
The biggest problem was in our heads. The Soviet Union was falling apart, and Russia has not yet gained its footing. We had to win over the circumstances and make people understand that it's possible to be the owner of your land and make food out of it without depending on any external factors, subsidized, government aid and whatever.
там, субсидирования, влияния государственных поддержки и все прочее. Ну и, в общем-то, смогли эту ситуацию решить.
We solved the land issue. The collective farmers could ask for their share in land and years.
Колхоза, который тоже был в плачевном состоянии, свой пай, земельный пай и пай в виде оленей. Ну, что, в принципе,
It started with just 3 people, and today we have something about 22 peasant farm enterprises.
Человек, которые решились на этот шаг, то есть действительно оленеводы. Потом 5, потом больше. На сегодняшний день уже около 22 крестьянских фермерских хозяйств.
The Reindeer Herders Union of the Nenes Okrug was formed rather recently, 5 years ago, but a lot of effort was put into creating the Yerv Reindeer Herders Union before that. It united the peasant farm enterprises of the Большеземельская Tundra in the time when колхозы were in decay.
Потом, после этого момента, когда оленеводы вышли из состава колхоза,
After that, when the herders left the kolkhoz, the administration decided to let the herders own their own livestock. It means that today all the reindeer herders are farmers.
Оленеводы, в общем-то, фермеры, то есть у них есть поголовье, если они даже в составе колхоза, у них есть поголовье, которое...
They have their own livestock, and then there is livestock that belongs to the kolkhoz. 60% belong to the collective farm, and the other 40% are their own. And they make living mostly from the latter.
40% это личное поголовье. Ну и люди за счет этого, в принципе, выживают в том плане, что...
It's no secret that collective farming doesn't pay much, so private livestock helps a lot with financial problems.
Имущественных, финансовых там затрат.
Бюджет наш, он напрямую не может в рамках бюджетного кодекса.
Because of the budget code, the state can't offer exclusive support to the agricultural production cooperatives. Because to some extent, they are business enterprises.
И, конечно, то есть бюджет не может оказывать такую помощь.
And the budget certainly can't support them here. We have to find other ways. Offer social support. That's where we try to do things.
Социальные, да. Ну, я думаю, что в рамках этого вот и мы пытаемся что-либо делать.
Today, most northern regions in Russia have local laws and programs to preserve and grow the reindeer herding as a lifestyle of indigenous people. The functions fulfilled by the Sami parliament in Norway are mostly implemented by local self-governing authorities and non-government organizations.
В целом, если сказать, то
Generally speaking, most of the things we do to help the development of the indigenous peoples are parts of some or other program.
развитие, на сохранение.
These are policy measures.
Заложено у нас в различных программах. Это программные мероприятия. Программа.
A long-term dedicated program means preserving and encouraging development of small-numbered indigenous peoples of the north in the Nenes Autonomous Okrug.
В этом году она у нас заканчивает свое действие, и следующего года у нас уже будет.
This year's program is already finished. Next year we are going to have a STEER program for preserving lifestyles of the indigenous people.
Указ президента, который утверждает стратегию национальной политики Российской Федерации. На сегодняшний день в июле месяце разработана программа по реализации данной стратегии. И вопрос национальный, он на сегодня один из приоритетных вопросов, который в том числе пытаемся мы решить. И от той позиции, от той политики, от тех предложений, от тех рекомендаций, которые будут поступать от регионов, соответственно, и тем больше и пристальнее будет внимание государства.
In the 1990s, a structural division for support of the small-numbered indigenous people was formed in the administration of the Nenes Autonomous Okrug. Then came a department, then a committee. 2009 saw the introduction of a separate executive body, Administration for the Small-Numbered Indigenous Peoples of the North and Traditional Occupations.
Наше управление занимается реализацией долгосрочной
Our administration works with a long-term dedicated called Small Numbered Peoples Preservation and Development Program. Currently, it's aimed at 2011 to 2013 time period. The administration also deals with implementing Article 20 of the Regional Reindeer Herding Act. It gives additional social support for herders and chamwives of all reindeer farms and family clans of the region. Another law was passed recently that supports the herders by providing them with firewood. We also working on law to organize traditional deer festival. The festival has been endorsed by law and includes a series of events. These are the main areas of our work.
Rights of the indigenous people of the North are protected by the representative bodies of the Nenets Autonomous Okrug as well. The Assembly of Deputies includes the Nenets and other small-numbered people of the North Committee.
Our Standing Commission deals with all issues concerning small-numbered peoples of the North. The Legislative Proposals Chamber directs all the amendments, changes and bills to us. Mainly these are issues of small-numbered peoples, reindeer herding, fishing, ecology, and use of natural resources, oil production and its relations to small-numbered peoples.
Rights to land and natural resources are the main stumbling blocks between the countries and indigenous peoples living on their territories. Different countries have different approaches to these issues. The period of collectivization brought most drastic changes into the lives of the reindeer herders. The government formed national districts. Migration paths of the nomadic tribes fell on the lands distributed between kolkhozy. Today these territories are still owned by the collective farms remaining from the kolkhoz days and by family clans. The herders are still traversing the lands of their ancestors.
A geobotanical program has been approved, a land survey that defines lands belonging to the agricultural production cooperatives. We are pushing for resource evaluation as well, so that the herder should know how much his resources are worth. This way, they can adequately deal with other resources users, state oil and gas prospectors and so on. We have to value on damage done, and not simply to the territory.
А ущерб должен не просто вот там взяли, посчитали травку, там, территорию, там, да, столько там оленей пасет, а учитывали, что вот если, грубо говоря, этот земельный
We have to evaluate the future damage and find an alternative.
Отобрали, грубо говоря, ну, будущую работу. Потому что если он там не сможет пасти оленей, как он прокормит себя, там, своих детей, семью и все остальное, значит, ему должна быть какая-то альтернатива предложена.
Everyone's used to the development of natural resources. Everyone knows that the region depends on it, and all the sides try to get maximum profit with minimum damage done. There have been many measures taken.
In order to see the big picture of how Nenes territories are used, Yesova activists have partnered with their Norwegian colleagues for a project called Monitoring Territories with Traditional Use of Natural Resources.
Мы на карту просто нанесли там, где кочуют оленеводы, и те объекты инфраструктуры, там, добычи природных ресурсов, которые появляются. Вот, допустим, построили трубопровод, а вдоль него кочуют там.
We have marked territories on the map, where the herders travel and where resources development infrastructure is built.
Из-за того, что строят объект.
They have also built a pipeline, and now herders have to travel along the pipe because the builders haven't thought to build overpasses. The deers crossed one way, and when they came back, there was a pipeline. We need rules to regulate moments like this, and today people take this into account. One way or another, the herders are in contact with the resource developers. Some of them help with bread, things like that. Previously, they had to buy bread in the village and then carry it back frozen. Now there is an oil field 10 to 15 kilometers away from the winter camp, and they can buy bread there. Usually, they never refuse the herders.
In Norway, the government has not yet recognized the right of the Sami people to the land they live on. This issue raises much debate. Historically, nobody owned the land of the Sami people, not even the Sami themselves. Only the northern county of Finnmark belonged to the Sami until the end of the 18th century. It was the land of the Kingdom of Sweden at the time. Later, that territory went to Norway. However, no official act was signed concerning the Sami people's right to own the land of their ancestors. In order to preserve another traditional Nenes occupation, fishing, the government started issuing fisher quotas in 2011.
очень долго переламывался этот момент, когда они
For a very long time, the Nenes couldn't get their quota. And of course, they continued to live as they used to. So fishing for themselves and their relatives, they inadvertently became poachers.
Сегодня вот люди, грубо говоря,
Today they can catch fish, but they can't sell it.
А у него другой нет
And they
работы.
have no other job.
Сегодня, да? Вот он в
The village is mostly unemployed.
все же будут в бюджетных работать. Да? Колхоз там на грани развала, закрылся и прочее. Но вот он что, он эту рыбу будет есть, а его по закону
The fisher
обязывают.
can only eat the fish, but the law
Детей в
says
школу отведи,
he has to send children to school
накорми.
and do all sorts of stuff.
Ну, одень в
If the
школу,
children
обязательно
didn't go to
форму,
school,
купи учебники,
maybe
там
they
всё
could
это
provide
дело,
for father.
да? Ну, если бы он в школу не ходил, может быть, они как-то прокормили.
Nenes activists suggest opening fish and reindeer meat collection points. They would allow indigenous people to provide for themselves using natural resources. It used to be the case in the Soviet Union. However, the Nenes Okrug doesn't have such points yet.
The first main issue in the Sami parliament in 1989-1990, it was the fisheries crisis in Norway. Which affected very badly, negatively, for many Sami people living in the coastal areas. That was the first case in the Sami parliament. And that's also one of the last big cases recently now in the Sami parliament with the rights of fishing in Sami territories, the coastal territories. That right was last year passed an act in the Norwegian Parliament was passed through, securing the Sami people the right to fish in fisheries when the resources are low, fishery resources, and that is in itself a quite big achievement, even though there was a debate on in which sense the Norwegian government gave the Sami people historical rights to fish. It was a detailed question, a very important detail, but the Sami parliament accepted the proposal from the Norwegian government, and now we have it in the law, the right to fish.
The government made a law that the big boats cannot come into the fjords to do fishing. But in the same time, they were negotiating with this Sami parliament about the finest, very smooth solution for that. And the solution was that they can make dispensations for some boats. And for example, our fjord, Tana Fjord here, is totally empty for this blue cod, which is a main resource for us normal people. When we go to the fjord to fish to cook for the everyday, but there's only very small fish now because this big boat took everything, and that's very visible.
And there is also the mining rights, you know, because there are the mining rights are now a big issue in this area, and a lot of international companies want to move in because there is so much minerals here. So both the fishery, the right to fisheries, you know, how to manage the resources there, about the mining rights, you know, all those things, they will be on the agenda for the next years.
To solve all the right issues of indigenous small-numbered people of the North, the government will certainly need some time. On a historic scale, the people have the time, but can individuals wait so long? When people have questions regarding their traditional ways of life, they need the answers here and now. Non-government organizations are one of the instruments they can solve everyday problems for the people of the North.
Kaldo was established in 2001. It is based as a resource center for indigenous people's rights for Norway, but it works more also as a broader aspect of a field also. It is a center that is kind of coordinating, as is centered lots of information of indigenous people's rights, distributing it, building capacity here in Norway.
The goal of the information center is to increase our knowledge on the rights of the Sami and other indigenous people of the world. Galdo collects, processes, and distributes information and documents on the rights of indigenous people on the international as well as local level.
The main tasks for Galdo is to work as advisory body for indigenous people's rights, for whom them are asking and so on. Also, we have this publication that is called Galdo Jala, that is doing a lot of about indigenous people's rights and is in a more kind of informatic academical level of explaining what are the indigenous people's rights with the certain topics that has been selected.
Nenets Autonomous Okrug also has various non-government organizations.
The SOA Association was created in 1989, when the indigenous people's movement was just starting.
Там было поддержано создание, насколько я помню, кружком партии, тогда, как это называется, да, тоже и в том числе государственными органами для того, чтобы эти проблемы вывести на другой план. Пытаемся
We try to deal with issues of the Nenets region, like reindeer herding, working with indigenous peoples in rural areas.
С теми людьми, которые живут на земле, особенно в сельской местности, им помогать в решении тех вопросов, которые возникают.
The challenges are abundant. Sometimes we resolve them, sometimes not.
Наша ассоциация такая общественная организация, которая
Our organization is not governmental.
на добровольных началах,
So when herders and fishers ask us for help, we help with the voluntary work where possible.
Вопросы, которые люди ставят. Оленеводы, рыбаки.
The SOA Association has departments in most municipal districts of the Nenets Autonomous Okrug.
К нам поступают письма, обращения, на которые мы стараемся реагировать и направить тем,
We get lots of request letters. We try to send them of those capable of solving this relevant problem.
Совет, это 11 человек, совет старейшин есть свой, которые, ставят, допустим, серьезные вопросы, да, и решают. Например, мы помогали, участвовали в
Some of those important questions we discussed at the Council of Elders. For example, we helped acquire financial benefits to those herders' children who don't go to the kindergarten. We offered this and helped with implementing these benefits.
Поднимали, обсуждали и помогали в продвижении.
People of the Nenets Okrug can also contact the Reindeer Herders Union. They offer consulting as well as legal assistance.
We offer legal aid. It means that we can do bookkeeping work for the self-regulating organizations. Those are agricultural production cooperatives, most of them strong organizations with their own staff.
У нас, бывают случаи, особенно когда люди с Востока,
Sometimes we have the cases where the herders from the eastern part who don't speak Russian properly.
Были случаи, когда просто человек плохо понимает по-русски. Есть такое. И Иван Гришитков и Ирина Ханзер выступали в роли переводчика, мы писали ходатайство для того, чтобы все-таки
We have sent a petition for this problem to be taken into account when these cases are conducted.
Те нюансы, которые вызваны особенностью того, что эти события, эти преступления в тундре произошли.
Today you can rarely see a situation when indigenous people don't speak a state language, when they need an interpreter. Usually it is vice versa. The numbers of native speakers are shrinking by the year.
I know people from my own generation. I'm 60 years, unbelievable. It's not more than, say, 30, 40, 45 years ago. They were forced to learn and speak Norwegian. And in the northern area of Norway, small kids were taken from the Sami villages and from their parents and families and moved into schools where they also had to live and stay for years. And they were not allowed to speak their Sami language. They were forced to speak Norwegian, and you can just yourself imagine what that created in.
The way they have done that the Norwegians and these foreigners, they have just moved here and they took the control of our areas by saying that you guys are not so developed, not so smart as the main population, so they have been governing us. And there has been, of course, oppression, because they were saying that your language is not nothing, that you should just forget it, learn Norwegian on the Norwegian side. And I guess it's the same process in all these other countries like Finland, Sweden, and also Russia.
Мы в свое время прошли в 60-е годы не только ненецкий народ, а почти все народы.
We had to resist the government in our days. Until the 60s, the government helped indigenous people. We had institutes, colleges, but in the 60s they invented a nation of Soviet people. And they kept telling us we were Soviet people. Everyone had to speak Russian.
То в 60-х годах, после того, как у нас появилось понятие «советский народ», особенно в Конституции, то нам, как всегда, говорили, вы советские люди, у нас нет
So our generation reached a place when we spoke our language only in private.
И вот как бы наше поколение уже оказалось в том положении, что мы говорили, но уже не на людях, например, а только между собой на родном языке. И это привело к тому,
This led to family speaking only Russian, so the young generation, our children and grandchildren, stopped speaking their native languages because they grew up in a Russian-speaking environment.
Today, the law on education states that the children have a right to learn their native language, yet the schools face another challenge, the lack of qualified teachers.
We used to have teachers from training colleges, but then they stopped offering those courses. Now only the Gerson University grants degrees in indigenous languages.
The University of Tromsø in Norway has a faculty of law with a research group focused on the rights of the Sami people.
This university has as a special focus the Sami issues. And that implies that we have a department in the Faculty of Law, the Sami Rights Group. We have a department in linguistics that are working with the Sami language. And in particular, we have one group that is working to make the Sami language electronic, to use computer technology, to use modern technology to try to preserve the language. And then we have in the social sciences, anthropology, visual, cultural studies, sociology, all the different sectors of the university have a kind of Sami focus. And some of these departments, they succeed better than others, but as a whole, the university has that as a focus for the work of the university, the Sami issues. And that is due to the fact that also the university acknowledges that Norway is based on the territory of two peoples, the Norwegians and the Samis. And this university shall be both a Norwegian university and a Sami university.
Well, language is one of the core central issues for the Sami parliament, the Sami language. And in Norway we have three official Sami languages. Recently we passed a white paper in the Sami parliament about Sami language. And until now we have had some areas, some municipalities in Norway who have a special responsibility to to take care of Sami language and to develop it. But now we have said in our white paper that these are basic human rights to be able to speak your own language, and those rights should go for every Sami people living in Norway. It shouldn't depend on which municipality you live in.
Like in our city here, we have kindergartens for kids who are Sami or have Sami roots, or one of their parents are Sami. And already from the beginning in the school you can choose Sami as another language or a second language, so you can learn about your heritage and your traditions. And we have some festivals that focus on the indigenous people, not only from this area but from all over the world. So they meet to encourage each other and share their culture, and especially in music and art. So development is going in the good and the right direction.
Folklore and creative unions have become one of the tools for preserving and promoting ethnic culture.
We set a task for ourselves: restore the language, because we have partly forgotten it ourselves. In 2012, UNESCO issued a report that all the languages of small-numbered peoples will be gone in 50 years. So, to last longer, make people speak their own language. We have to sing, song, make plays in our language. That's how we attract the youth.
Людмила Bulygina leads the Haniptso folk group. The women here are singing songs of their mothers and teach those songs to the young people. The repertoire includes Nenes folklore and epics. Today, the Kwens are trying to rectify the results of Norvegization policy, which affected the development of their language. It is the language of the Kwens that has become the main thing to fight for among the public activists trying to preserve the unique culture of their people from oblivion. Despite that, the Kwen language, an integral part of multicultural Norway, is slowly disappearing. Today, a handful of public activists are fighting to save the Kwen language and preserve the heritage of their ancestors. Hilde Skanke is one of the staff of 7 in a non-government organization working on preserving and promoting the Kwen language.
We have one who works with language courses for our Kwen language. He's traveling around in Norway and have these language courses, mostly in Oslo, but also in North Troms and in the east of Finnmark. We are translating a lot, and we are translating from everything, from speeches to books to folders. We have translated for the Norwegian Church the new Psalms in the new Psalm book and the liturgy. So we are doing a lot of translations.
I'm afraid it's a little bit sad. As an example, we don't have any teaching books at all for the Kweni language, and that even if Norway is a very rich country, we don't have a single teaching material in the books for the children. And there is not many people that speak Kwen language, but luckily some new youth want to learn. A lot of persons in my organization are above 50, maybe 50, 60, 70 years, and we need to do something for the youth and make the youth be interested in showing that they are Kwens.
The youth can learn the details of traditional Kwen lifestyle in the Kwen Museum. Sigrid Skarstein is the head of the Varanger Museum. Its Vatsjo department specializes in Kwen culture.
So they are groups, now young queens coming out of the closet and so on. So they are very proud of being queens and wanted people to be called queens and so on. So the situation today has been that there's been a very great discussion, especially here in the East, about this. Because very many queens, they don't like this queen, they don't like the museum to be called a queen museum. We should be called a Finnish museum and a Norwegian Finnish museum. But very many young people, they wanted to be called a queen museum.
The lack of adequate resources and finance creates additional difficulties. The Quens have chosen theatre as a medium to tell about the history of their people. The staff of the Queen University had an idea of Who Am I, an international theatre project.
We have Karelis, we have Quens, and we decided to bring the youth of these two peoples together to make a common project. We made theater the basis of our project because it is easier to learn ethnic culture through theater. Song, dance, everything comes together. It is interesting that they have only 5 days together, but in those 5 days they learn a lot about each other's nationalities, moments like that.
The Nenes Etnmas Okrug holds annual Nenes Writing Days, a month-long campaigns including exhibitions, seminars, workshops and refresher courses, presentations and roundtable discussions on the topic of preserving and promoting the Nenes language.
The issue of self-definition is still one of the major ones for small-numbered peoples of the North. They can get back their land and resources. They can preserve their unique culture through the ages. But what is it all for if the youth won't acknowledge their roots? That's why the most NGOs focus their work on young people.
The issue of self-definition is still one of the major ones for the small-numbered peoples of the North. They can get back their land and resources. They can preserve their unique culture through the ages. But what is it all for if the youth won't acknowledge their roots? That is why most non-government organizations focus their work on young people.
We have
certain dynamics. There are many people who wish to express their ethnic identity, to show that they are Nenets and that they speak their native language. But there are many who would like to speak their language, but they have no time to learn it and to specialists to teach them.
Sometimes I'm not so optimistic when I see that people are very much turning away from the most important part of the culture, which is the spirituality. And if you don't have the spiritual respect for the land and for the culture, you will not get anything. You will never survive it only with the language, because the Sami society of today is very, very fixed on only the language problem. If you speak your language, then you are a real Sami. But it's just a very, very small part of the. Even if it's an important part. A culture will never survive only by speaking the language. That you have to have deeper roots in the culture, and the deep roots are the respect for the land and respect for the culture, respect for the reindeers and respect for the spirituality.
Different peoples, different histories, and such a similar fates. The challenges faced by indigenous people are, as it is, alike wherever they live. The world community recognizes the need to protect the rights of indigenous people, because they are the keepers of a rich linguistic and cultural diversity. They have preserved a unique system of knowledge and philosophy. If we look at the ways different countries try to overcome their challenges, we can say one thing for certain. Only working together, subarctic countries can help those who have lived on their territories for age. It is true for Russia and Norway, who have their own ways of facing these challenges. Our countries have a lot to learn from each other, because sharing experience and international cooperation are important means of reaching a common goal. Preserving unique culture and age-old traditions of the small-numbered indigenous people of the North